Hello again. My name is Matthew and this is Conscious Recovery. All right, we are finished with our Foundations of Recovery video series where I talk about ideas, concepts, principles that I think we need to understand before we get started into the work of recovery. Mostly because I don't want people to quit before they've even, made any progress. So if you haven't watched those videos, go back and watch them now. Otherwise, let's get started with the first question that we're going to ask in order to start looking inwards and figuring out what our addiction was actually doing. And in order to do that, you need to get a notebook. Writing is incredibly important in recovery. A couple reasons. One, writing is just a different level of consciousness. When you learn to write out your thoughts and your feelings properly, it brings your thinking to another level, your awareness of what's going on inside of you to another level. It really lets you operate on a higher level of consciousness. It also gives you the added benefit of being able to look back at previous entries. Write something every day towards your recovery. And then after a month or two or 6 months, you can look back and you can read what you wrote on day 1 and day 10. And you're going to see that that's kind of a different person than the person you are at that moment. You will see growth, you'll see progress, and that will help motivate you to grow and progress further. So that's what I need you to do. Get a notebook, go to the thrift store, 50 cents, easy. Get a notebook, start writing stuff down. And if writing's an issue for you, make a video. Make a video on your phone where you just say these things out loud, and then you still have some kind of a documented record that you can look back on later to give you a better perspective on your recovery. All right, so pen and paper in hand, answer this question with, half a page or a page, whatever you can get out. What is the hardest part about quitting your substance? What's the most difficult part of quitting? All right, we're all addicted to something and you got to give it up. So when you do, what is hard about it specifically? All right. And this question will depend somewhat on how much clean time you have. If you're just starting out and you have no clean time, just try to imagine what would be the most difficult part for the first week or two. If you've had some clean time under your belt, then just look back and ask yourself what was like the difficulty in the first 2 weeks versus the first month or 6 months, right? Whatever feels right. But just write out what was the most difficult part about quitting. Okay, take a minute, write that down, and then come back and I'll share my answers with you. All right. So my answer to that question comes in stages. I would say the first week or two, and then the first 3 months, 6 months, and then finally the problems I had from 6 months to a year. The first week or two, my biggest concern with quitting, the most difficult part of quitting, was withdrawal. I was addicted to alcohol and I was highly dependent. And so I ended up detoxing in the psych ward. And it was a good thing that I was medically supervised because I had a really rough detox. I had delirium tremens, I was seeing things, I was hallucinating, and it was a rough go. So detox is a really difficult portion of it. If you need help detoxing, go to a facility. It's very helpful. Quitting on your own, it's tough. And so do your best. But that was my main concern. The hardest part about quitting for me was the first 2 weeks was withdrawal. After that, I'd say the first 3 months were sort of the most difficult for me in my recovery. The first 3 months, I was overwhelmed with what I call like the emotional hangover. All right, we all know what a hangover is from a night out drinking. Recovery, I think, has its own hangover where once you start getting a little bit of clean time and your mind starts healing just a little bit, you now have to confront all of the emotional weight from every bad decision, every shameful action that you've ever made. Now it's all coming back to you. You have to contend with all that negative emotion without your numbing coping mechanism of alcohol or drugs. So just getting through every bad thing that I've ever done and all those negative thoughts and memories swimming around in my head, that was the most difficult part of the first 3 months of my recovery. After that, like 3 months to 6 months, I was probably isolation, loneliness. I had no good relationships. Like my family was starting to come around and give me a chances again, and they were supportive, and that's all good. But I didn't have any real close friendships, close relationships. I was very isolated. I was very alone. And being alone is a death sentence in recovery. We need other people. Other people are very important. So finding meaningful connections, finding people that you could count on and trust is a difficult thing, especially when you're hanging out in the rooms of recovery. So That was a big struggle for me. And then finally, from my first 6 months to my first year, it was meaning and purpose. I felt empty. I felt like there was something missing in my life. My life was like flat or dull or rudderless. Like there's no direction I was heading in. I didn't know where I was going, what I was doing. And it just felt like I felt like I didn't know what I was here for. And so that was a really difficult thing for me, is just trying to find a way to build meaning and purpose into my everyday life. That was the most difficult thing for me. So depending on my answers, you may want to rethink yours. Get a good page, write it out. Ask yourself what the most difficult part is. And then in the next video, we're going to talk about how we can look at these difficulties as a way to divine what our plan should be towards our recovery. All right. Thank you, and we'll see you in the next one.